organizations to join that campaign. And if the campaign was to eliminate poverty in this country, but yet and still we're sitting up here in Michigan, leading in the nation as far as the number of people that are forced to live below the poverty levels.
We're trying to build this campaign, and we think the best way to build it is to go out and meet with the people who are on the front lines of the struggle in different places in the country and learn from them.
The people on the Poor People's Campaign are usually pretty poor, to tell you the truth. Well, I just don't have health care ourselves. You know, sometimes we don't have necessarily food in our own fridge. And a lot of us come out here just to talk to other people, you know, and to organize. Dr. King was a man for the people, you know. One of the last things that he worked on was the Poor People's Campaign. We have an obligation to keep that going. And I think there's a lot of Dr. Kings like all over the country.
We're trying to build a movement of the poor and dispossessed. People uniting on the basis of what they have in common, how they're hurt around all of these different issues of poverty, housing, homelessness, the environment.
We immigrated to the United States from Mexico. I got involved stopping deportations of people in my community who were getting deported. And I had wonderful leaders around me who supported me and who helped me understand what was going on, and that it wasn't my community's fault that we were getting deported, but that it was bigger structures in place that were trying to get rid of poor people in this country. And that's what I was seeing in places like Health Card, where people are struggling to get health care, which is what we're fighting for in Pennsylvania, where people are struggling to get housing and to get water and to get clean air, which is basic and is natural, and everybody should have access to it.
I want y'all to look around at this crowd and tell somebody beside you, say, what up, bro? What up, sister? Let the world see some black and white folk hugging each other, some Latinos. Let me tell you why this is so important. Trump and others just played the hate game. He tried to make out that poverty is a black-brown issue, and that saying to white people the reason you're poor is because of them. Those other folk, those Muslims, those immigrants, those black people, those Latinos. And that's why this movement is so important. Because when you're out here black, white, and brown, you are breaking through the fear. So tell somebody around you, we're going to change the world. Change the world. Black, white, and brown together.
I tell folks, you have to have a lot of faith to fly in a tin can full of gas through the air. That's all it is. The diversity of the crowd last night, that's the unity, that's the coalition. When we penetrate that level of understanding and build that kind of coalition, not only will it be the 64 million people who make less than 15, it'll be millions and millions of other people, you know, across the country. Okay, thank you now.
Thank you for being here.
New York,
What's up? How you doing? Nice to meet you.
Feels like the right place to be. A lot of military veterans feel it's important to be out here. We want to see an end to our police forces supporting big business and big government rather than the interests of our communities. We don't need an actual draft because so many people are in poor, desperate situations that they're driven into the military to seek those benefits. Now that I have a son and I have so many friends that have children and I see that impact, you know, I want a better future for them. I want to change this country for the better. As an American and as a patriot, that's what I'm duty-bound to do. Being here in Standing Rock, witnessing the unity of all the tribes, and people from all walks of life. There's probably damn near 10,000 people here today on Thanksgiving. And seeing people get along and working together and building infrastructure that's needed to support so many people in a place like this is just wild. I mean, that gives me hope alone, you know, and even if we're not successful with this movement against this pipeline, against this drilling, we're gonna take those lessons and rebuild them in a new spot in a more effective way. And we're going to eventually win.
That's right.
We can't not win.
That's right.
I'm hopeful when I see the people coming together around the nation. When I see all of these movements, I still believe in the possibility of becoming a more perfect nation.
Thank you for that. Yeah. As you can tell, Reverend Barber, he's funny. He's funny to be around, and he's always got jokes. But he's also a very, very serious person to be around as well. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's all.
You do it.
I do it, okay.
I'm sorry.
You have to apologize, it's all fair. I got it. So you were just hearing from Valerie Jean. Let me introduce her to you, please. Valerie Jean is a mother of 5 and grandmother of 2. She organizes for the Michigan Poor People's Campaign, People's Water Board, the People's Potluck Detroit, everybody, Nicole said, which also includes Detroit Light Brigade and Michigan Welfare Rights Organization. Valerie believes that water is a human right and spends her days fighting to ensure that every Michigander has access to clean, affordable water. Please welcome Valerie.
I'm sorry about that. Thank you. Okay, it's a real honor to be here and to be able to talk about the Poor People's Campaign, and especially to so many young people. There's a whole portion of the Poor People's Campaign that's being led by millennials, so check that box when you get to it. You can also go online and find the pledge and take the pledge online, and it'll get to us. So I'm going to tell you my story kind of quickly, and then talk about the arts and culture and documentation of the Poor People's Campaign. So my story starts, it's a lot like Nicole's, as far as we reached a point where we could not afford water. Water's simply not affordable in Detroit for a lot of reasons, and there's like 10,000 reasons that we could go down. But there's a whole lot of people who just don't have the will to make sure that water is affordable to everyone. And that's the basis of it. It started in 2013 and 14. We went through what was called the polar vortex winter, where we had 12 and 17 below days for days at a time. If you were in a neighborhood like mine, all you got to do was pay, or all you could do was pay that electricity and gas bill. They were like $900 a month, trying to keep those big houses, big old houses warm. In most people's pipes burst, and if you're poor folk, it takes a very long time to recover from something like all of your pipes bursting, right? And things like that. So many people were going through that, and we were no different. My family was no different. Coming out of that winter, we struggled to make our ends meet for months and months. We learned about the mass water shutoffs directly right after that winter. In February, we started hearing about it. In March, people were sounding the alarm. Activists and people who were paying attention were sounding the alarm because they were starting to shut off 3,000 homes a week. The company that was hired to do the mass water shutoffs, Homrick, the construction company, altogether they've been paid $12 million. They were hired off the get for $6 million. Now, I want you to think about how many people that could have been helped with $6 million, or what infrastructure could have been built with $6 million for people to have water. But that wasn't in the plan. They gave it to a construction company because they didn't have the infrastructure to shut off that many people's water every day, every week. So they hired Homrick, and we started protesting. We had a weekly protest. We called them Freedom Fridays in front of the DWSD. We were kind of gearing up this movement and letting folks know that this was happening. By July, my family hadn't figured out how to make their ends meet. We were still in a desperate situation, and I knew that we were going to get our water shut off. It was early morning on July 7th. I have 5 children, so I get up early and kind of drink coffee, meditate. It was about 6:45. I heard something out front. I looked out front and I saw a big red Homrick truck. I knew that I was about to have my water shut off. So I just grabbed my camera and my phone, and I just rushed out and stood over the water access point and said, you can't shut me off today. I got 5 kids in the house. You can call the cops if you want, but I'm not moving. The Hamrick guy was not, he was not gonna, he kind of put his hands up and the water key in his hand, kind of put him up and set the water key back in the truck and went across the street to my neighbor and shut her off, and came over on the other side of the street and in systematic shut everybody off in 3 blocks. Everybody. The whole neighborhood. Tell me endemic poverty when the whole neighborhood can't afford their water. I was still standing on my water access point, horrified as I'm watching them. I put out a Facebook post that Hamrick was shutting off my entire neighborhood and I needed help. And at that point in time, I called for help from Michigan Welfare Rights. I got on the phone with Ann Rawl, she's the angel, and she immediately hooked me up with Maureen. Unbeknownst to me, while I was still standing on my water access point, Maureen Taylor called the DWSD and got me a 30-day stay on my water bill so that they wouldn't come and arrest me. After they shut off the entire neighborhood, I guess it took about an hour. Within an hour, there's something really, like you have these awful, beautiful moments when something so horrific is happening to you. Within an hour from that Facebook post, hundreds of gallons of water had showed up on my front lawn, and we had made a makeshift water station. There was enough people showing up that we started sending out teams and knocking on folks' doors. It was really early in the morning, and just letting them know that their water had been shut off. And it was really something, the shame that people feel, you know, they don't want to, but when they find out that their entire neighborhood is shut off and none of you matter, it's a whole different level of fear and trauma to deal with. As we were knocking on doors, it became very, very clear that people were going to be making real hard decisions with the water that we had collected. People were they going to clean the house? Were they going to let their kids bathe or clean up with it? Thank you. You know, a lot of people, especially elderly people, were worried about the spread of germs and things like that. So we immediately put out another Facebook post and said that we need things like baby wipes and bleach and things like that. And people just started bringing that with water. It was also became very clear that people were not going to be cooking with their water. They're not going to use a whole bunch of water to cook spaghetti, right? People are going to be eating cold sandwiches and stuff like that you don't on paper plates because you're not going to use the water, right? That you have. So we got together and we put together a huge pot of community soup where people for days came through and dropped cans of beans and vegetables and things in it. About 5 days in, we were mad as hell. We decided to organize a mass march throughout my neighborhood, and about 300 people showed up. We marched through the neighborhood, and if anybody knows Woodward is the main vein going in and out of the city. 2 times a day it gets really, really congested of the folks coming in to work that don't, from out of the city and folks leaving from the city to work. So we quite strategically shut down Woodward at 5 p.m. With 300 people, and we marched for about a mile, because if we can't have water, you're not moving in and out of the city. We marched for about a mile down Woodward and went to Nandy's Cafe, where we first had our first mass meeting about the water shutoffs. It was then that we started talking about response. What was it going to look like for neighborhoods to come together in a team and respond to such horrific, would never let any entity walk in our neighborhood and shut off something as basic to water, as water to all of us. So that was the first talks of the response teams. We started creating those. At this point in time, where the whole city's in a crisis, whole neighborhoods, it wasn't just mine, all over the city were shut off. We're calling everyone, Michigan Welfare Rights, the People's Water Board, we're sending letters to the president. We're we're really reaching out to folks, trying to get the world to pay attention. It wasn't until the Council of Canadians got word of what was going on in Detroit, and they became very, very alarmed, and they helped us contact the United Nations. The United Nations sent 2 rapporteurs here to Detroit in October, and started talking. They came in. We gave them a tour so that they could see folks, they could see the living conditions that folks were in, they could talk to the folks that had their water shut off, and they could have firsthand experience about what was actually going on in the ground in Detroit. She kind of said to us, I don't have any real power here. I'm gonna write a report, and we're gonna give it to folks, but it's gonna be up to you guys to stay in the streets and fight for what you need. You're gonna have to come together and fight for what you need. After they wrote their report, at their last day, they went and met with the mayor, Mayor Mike Duggan, our mayor now, and he had this visceral response to them when they walked into the room, because he was so angry that they were there bringing light to this. He was really, really rude to them. He said, "Who invited you?" He called them little girls. He was like, "Where?" Yes, he called them little girls. He was so mad that they had brought, and they listened to him. He went on and on and on about why he had his city under control. He didn't call them, and he didn't need them, right? Kind of real. And she kind of looked at him, she said, and then she was like, I didn't come here. I don't care what situation, none of your gobbledygook. I don't care about that. I'm coming to say you're literally in violation of international law right now. So all that stuff you're talking, that's not what I'm here for. I'm writing a report, and I'm going to give it to everybody, and we're going to talk about it at the United Nations. And we've been fighting ever since. That's where we've been at. We've been fighting for a water affordability plan to be put in place because the assistance programs simply don't work. As you can tell, we're 4 years in, and we've got 17,000 folks slated for shutoff. Actually, with my numbers, I've been doing the numbers, I think it's more like 24,000. So you know that it's not working. So that's why we need a Poor People's Campaign, and why you'll see folks organizing all over the city, not just in the next 40 days, but here on out, right? We're gonna flip this situation that we're in. It's that important. People's lives are at stake. I want to talk about the art and culture of the Poor People's Campaign just briefly. 150 artists and theomusicologists and documentarians gathered in Raleigh, North Carolina last month and a half ago, and we started talking about the songs of the campaign. What would those look like in creating songs, and creating big, huge art, 40-foot banners that can be seen from helicopters, and things like that. We talked about what the messaging was going to be for the Poor People's Campaign. So here in Detroit, we're going to be having massive art builds. We're going to be singing. We're going to be learning the songs. We're going to be creating our own songs. So if that's your thing, get with me. And if you'd like to create art or anything, when you give Nicole and she puts you into the database, you'll get email messages and stuff from us so that you can sign up for different subcommittees. There's art and culture, there's like 7 different ones. There's millennials, anything that you're into, it's in there, right? There's documentarians. We need everybody at the table for this. And it's not just about, yes, it's very important that we have folks willing to do civil disobedience, but it's also just as important that we have folks writing emails and that we have folks like databasing and things like that. So please keep that in mind, that there's going to be every way to connect to this campaign. What was my last thing? Oh, my last thing is ask folks to sign their pledge cards. So if you haven't signed it, please sign it and give it to Nicole. You can also go online and you can share the online, go right to the poorpeoplescampaign.org. You can share it on your Facebook page. People can plug in and pledge in right there. It's super easy to share that way. You can go and like the Michigan Poor People's Campaign page to keep up with all of the events that we're going to be putting out and organizing. And there's going to be many, many events in those 40 days. We're talking about educationals. We're talking about learning, like I said, big art builds, and of course, civil disobedience trainings in the whole 9 yards. There's going to be a lot going on that 40 days, and we'll be able to kind of keep track that way at the Michigan Poor People's Campaign. I think that's about it. Thank you. I think that we have time for questions. Yes? Do we have time for questions? Yes, we do. Okay. All right. So at this point in time, let's open it up.
I've heard through Nextdoor, which is a really common way, at least for people in my neighborhood, to communicate, that DWSD is also not fixing holes. Is that part of what you're trying to take? So what happens is, like, when there's a flood, there are sinkholes, there's sinkholes all over the city, for people who don't know that. And they never really fix it, they patch it if you are lucky enough to live in the 7.2. But if you don't, they just don't fix it. And so there are people with holes where their backyard used to be, or holes where their driveway used to be, and so they can't access their homes easily. Is that part of the campaign?
I mean, fixing infrastructure should, it's, you know, the campaign is all of that, all of that, any kind of local struggle that we can put into that. But as far as the infrastructure, there's no will to fix infrastructure. Those people don't matter to the powers that be. It definitely don't matter to the mayor. So you'd have to actually care to think about infrastructure and people's basic, how they live, to be able to pull in your own driveway, right? Mm-hmm. And there's no will to do that, so it's definitely for the Poor People's Campaign. We have to make them. We have to push them, because they have no will right now. So we have to make them do what we need so that we actually can live with dignity, right? That's the way I see it. Anybody else want to answer that?
Yeah, just quickly on that. Both the city of Detroit and Detroit Water and Sewage were subject to predatory loans from banks. Those where they're complicated credit cops and swaps, and that's on which the bankruptcy was predicated. As soon as bankruptcy was declared, those loans became fully due. They triggered that. So that's on the bankruptcy side. On the water and sewage side, before the bankruptcy, Detroiters had passed a $500 million bond measure to do infrastructure repair in Detroit water and sewage. And instead of that money, the bulk of it being used for infrastructure repairs, it was used to buy out of the credit swaps and cops. So the bulk of that money went to the bank. And that's one of the reasons, I mean, that there are lots of things going on with the regionalization of the water and sewage system and the Great Lakes Water Authority. In a certain sense, Detroiters funded in the same way that expressways created urban sprawl and suburbanization. The water infrastructure did that as well. Anyway, the sinkholes, the water pumps, the drainage pumps, all of those things which are in need of repair got passed over by the banks.
Thank you very much. Your presentations were excellent. I came in late. I was applying for a job. So can you give me the brief version of what's going on in terms of what's the agenda of this squeegeeing people off the map? What's that?
Squeezing people off the map?
Yeah,
Well, just briefly, one of the things I was sharing was that Detroit is formerly a city of 2 million people, now 700,000. In order to equalize the infrastructure to make it fit for a city that, in one way of looking at it, has too much land, is to clear certain neighborhoods and concentrate population, including bringing folks back into the city in certain neighborhoods and clearing others, making the footprint smaller. So there are a whole bunch of mechanisms that are involved in that.
Are the people having somewhere that they can move?
No.
Very good question, which is not being tracked in a very systematic way.
Okay. And the last issue is on the 7 that you have, the 7 areas that you can work on with the Poor People's Campaign. Do you have a pray the devil back to hell?
No, but we need, no. There is,
You know what I'm talking about, right?
there is a clergy section.
No, I'm talking about where they had that campaign in Africa.
Oh, I don't know.
All right. Anybody familiar
You
with
caught me
it?
off guard, I'm sorry.
Liberia.
Yes. Yes. And it was just strong prayer warriors, and they changed a lot. And if you have more details on it, sir, you can share it, because it's been quite a few years. But it was a very successful campaign.
What was it called?
Pray the devil back to hell.
That was actually the name of the documentary.
Okay.
It was when the women actually decided that they wanted to sort of rule things and influence men to make something happen. And so they took it upon themselves to have this initiative where women actually forced the men to do what they need to do.
All power to the people. All right.
Well, I'll be in touch and I'll research.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I forgot your name, ma'am.
Nicole.
Nicole? Okay, yeah, sorry. Maybe I misheard or something, but how did your water bill actually get up to $5,000? Were they just,
Well,
did you ever figure that out? Were they just charging you?
probably,
Like,
And this is my, uneducated on water and infrastructure answer, is that the house that was 2 doors down from me, whose basement had become an Olympic-sized swimming pool, that water was free running. It had to be billed some type of way. So it went to me. It went to they dispersed it through the neighbors surrounding that house, which is what they do.
so,
Instead of coming out and shutting it off themselves.
Right, but they have a camp, if you talk to them, they'll tell you, if you notify us of free running water, we'll be out in 48 hours, but it took them from 2012 to 2014 to get out there and shut the water off. And they still didn't shut it off until, the United Nations came in October, they shut it off in October of 2014, which was approximately, 5 months after they shut my water off?
thank you.
How did they explain the increases in your bill, though? I mean, you went from...
This was their literal answer. This was their literal answer. It's actual usage, so pay for it. That was their answer. It was no, let me investigate and see if there's some issues. I literally had my meter pulled from my home to see if it was defective. Never got the outcome of that. And there are, I'm not gonna put everyone down at DWSD. There are people that are literally there that do their job. Usually when they do their job, they end up without their job. And I had a representative that told me that they're literally, you have other accounts under your name that are not yours. You have been continually billed for a residence you no longer lived in, which some people had decided to squat in the home. They never took it out of your name, and you were billed for about 2.5 years at an address you hadn't lived at. I was billed from July of 2009 through November of 2011 at a residence I no longer lived out at anymore. And all that could be a contributing factor, but they won't actually come out and admit that.
Was that for water and sewage?
Water and sewage, because if you pay attention to your bill, whatever your water is, double that, that's your sewage.
More than that.
Yeah, more than double.
I have a question. Were you the owner of the home?
No.
So I own a home and I've never had a water bill come in my name. It goes to the property.
Well,
So-
they've recently have changed some things, and they've literally made it where if you as a property owner decide that it's a single-family dwelling, you can make a decision to have the tenant put the water in their name to live in the residence. You can only the only way you can't do that